We are live. So this hangout is on air, and I am speaking to Jim Anderson, who is a teacher of A Course in Miracles and a student of A Course in Miracles. And how are you this evening, Jim?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Really great. I'm enjoying the autumnal factor here as the leaves are starting to, number one, change color and then eventually descend from their lofty boughs. But so you have been with A Course in Miracles for a number of years, but only stepped into the full comprehension of it for the last, what, 5 or 6 or 8 years?
About 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
A little less than that, actually, but yeah.
And the Course in Miracles, for me, when I first started to experience, the transformation, the alchemy, I guess you could say, of what happens when you start applying the Course to your life. I found that it was very subtly transformative initially, but then there were large changes that occurred in my life. Have you found that to be true also?
Boy, what happened for me was that after 40 years of spiritual seeking, I'm getting a lot of feedback right now. After 40 years of spiritual seeking, I was making some steady progress, but it was very incremental, doing my meditations and everything. And then finally, when I read the Course and when I started applying forgiveness and trying to live what the Course was telling me to do, I found the changes very, very quick and very dramatic. I was very surprised. I was a little scared, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, that makes sense, because the Course does somewhat undermine the reality of this realm. The material world all of a sudden starts to kind of dissolve around the edges as you step into the Course. Was that your experience too?
Yeah, I felt that forgiveness was, applying forgiveness the way the Course describes it was an incredibly powerful tool, because you don't really, we all hear the word forgiveness from whatever spiritual backgrounds we come from, but you don't really understand forgiveness until you read the Course's version of it. And that was a very powerful thing to happen in my life. Another thing that happened right after I started the Course, once I accepted the Course, I really got it, was that I had a dream. It was I would say about 3 weeks after I told myself that that this was really the path I wanted to follow. I had a dream, and it was a hand coming from the right side, handing me the book, handing me the Course in Miracles. And a voice said, "This is the last book you'll ever need." And it just blew me away. It was just, it was one of those dreams that I'll never forget it for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it definitely triggers a lot. For me, I think perhaps the most important trigger that I recognized as I was going along and stepping into the Course was the sudden realization that all of the desire world, all of the aspirations and striving begin to initially change focus, and now it's all just beginning to dissolve into this space of allowance and merely experiencing life as it unfolds.
Yeah, except for one problem, and that is that you have to, the only way to get rid of desire is naturally, and that is that you have to try everything before you realize it doesn't work. It's easy to say that the Course can tell you to get rid of your desires, but it's another thing to actually want to stop driving fast or drinking or having sex or doing all the things that we love to do, because you have to go through your life and realize that these things are not working for you anymore, and they will lose their appeal on their own. because we all have this hole inside of us, and it's the size of God, and we're trying to fill it with stuff that's tiny and small. And so we're gonna keep dumping all this stuff into this hole to try and fill it, and eventually we're gonna realize none of this is working. So that desire that we all have naturally, we don't understand that there's something else besides that desire that we have for the things of this earth that will work for us. We don't really understand that. And then when you read the Course, or when you maybe another path similar to the Course, where they tell you that all you need is God to fill that hole for you, nobody knows what that means, because we don't know what it means to let God into our lives. We just don't know what that means, because God seems so absent from this world. And so I think a lot of people who end up following the Course are people who have naturally gotten to that point where this world just isn't working for them anymore, and they're looking for what's next. And as Helen and Bill's famous conversation went, where Bill finally said, "There's got to be something more than this," and I think that's what the Course answers. What is there that's more than this?
Yeah, we go through the adventures in this realm, and we always feel an ongoing thirst.
Yeah.
You know, it's like being in the desert and not being able to satiate, you know, that need for refreshment, for fulfillment. Now, there are dozens of books out there on the shelves right now around the Course in Miracles, and you are in fact getting ready to come forth with your own book. And so what is it that you think that you can contribute to this ongoing dialogue about what the Course means? What are you bringing into the picture here?
Well, as I was studying the Course, and as I was reading material on the Course, and as I was attending Course workshops and groups, there were a lot of questions that weren't getting answered sufficiently for me. And one of the things that I noticed that people, this is just an example, but one of the things that people seem to be ignoring was the elephant in the room, and that was that in order to understand the Course, you have to accept the idea that this is not real, that this is a dream, that you are not here right now, you are actually asleep. Now that's an incredibly big nut to crack. I mean, that's a big thing to swallow for a lot of people. And I don't think people were talking about it. Nobody I knew was talking about it, because even if it's true, well, so what? How do you prove it? And so I decided to start thinking about it and talk about it to myself, first of all, because that's how I usually, that's how my process works. So the first 2 chapters of my book are devoted to this life being a dream. And what I try and do is help people understand, and when I say people, I mean I helped myself understand it by writing it down. I try and help people understand what it means that this is a dream. What's the difference between this waking life that we think is real and your dreams at night, for instance? What's the difference? Does anybody know what the difference is? And after thinking about it, I came to the conclusion that there are really just 2 main differences. And the first one is that this dream, this waking dream, is consistent because it's a collective dream of the Son of God. So in order to convince us that this is actually real, it has to follow. It has to be consistent. It has to lead from one day to the next. The only reason we have school, the only reason anybody teaches anybody anything, is to teach them what we learned in the past, and so what you can expect this life to give you. Physics, the only reason physics works, the laws of physics work, is because they are consistent. Everything in this dream is consistent. So I've never heard anybody say that, and I talk about that in my book. And the only other thing that is different from this dream is that when you go to sleep at night and you wake up the next day, you know that that was a dream. And why do you know it was a dream? Because you woke up and you found out that there was another world after that dream. We don't have that here. We don't know that there's another world. We can take somebody's word for it, but until you actually experience it, you don't know that this is a dream because you've got nothing else. There's nothing else. We are so lost in this dream because we have erased our own memories so that we could live in this guilt without fear of waking up. And so that's what we have done to make this real.
So basically, it's like the Course reiterates over and over again. We split the mind and hid a part of the mind so that we didn't have to actually confront all of the images and all of the realities that that are stored in the memory banks.
Yep. And also because of why we did this in the first place. Another thing that wasn't discussed in anything that I'd ever seen or heard or read was the tiny mad idea. The Course talks about the tiny mad idea. Well, what is the tiny mad idea? The tiny mad idea was a strange little thought that the Son of God had, but the Course only hints at it. The Course actually tells you what it is, but it never goes into much detail or spends a lot of time on it. It's kind of spread out through the whole book. And what the tiny mad idea is to me, from what I've read, was a pretty substantial concept consisting of some pretty heavy layers of thought. And I think the first time I ever heard this was from Alan Watts, the British guy who brought Zen Buddhism to the West. And that is that the Son of God had this idea that it had everything in the world. It had, or everything it could possibly want, except one thing that it didn't know. What is the one thing that God doesn't know? And that is, he doesn't know what it's like not to be God. And that's what we're doing. We're experiencing what it's like not to be God. And the only way to really experience that fully is if we forget that we're God. So that's another reason that we have erased our memories, so that we could experience this in a real way.
And, you know, from my perspective, I've always sensed that the real thought, because we are God in manifestation, that the real single thought that created the Big Bang and the follow-up was simply the idea of separation, stepping out of the collective, being apart from God. And yet, if God is life, then separation from God could only come to one conclusion, which would be the illusion of death. So, when I know that from the things that I have read from your blog, you have a tendency to be a little bit more edgy around the Course than a lot of people. I think a lot of people have a tendency to put bubble wrap around the Course and, kind of soften the blow. But a lot of your dialogue, I think, is very much cut to the chase kind of ways of engaging the reader. Is that something that you felt was lacking with a lot of the Course discussion circles?
Yeah, well, I think people always walk on eggshells when they're talking about God or something that they feel is holy, or they try and become something that they're not, just because they want to treat it a little more, they want to treat the subject in a more holy way. And I don't think that that's what is required at all. I think I think being politically correct about it isn't what we need to do at all. We need to say, well, this is what it is. Maybe we should talk about it and get it out in the open. Because I find when I do talk about it directly, people respond to it pretty positively.
Mm-hmm. And are you out moving around, chatting with people and interacting with groups and things of that sort?
Yeah, as much as I can. Right now, for the last month or so, I haven't been, but yeah, because I've been focusing on other things. But yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm. I find that with A Course in Miracles that there definitely is a need for community and for dialogue, because you can read the same sentence 200 times and not quite get the full impact. And yet, you know, you can have a discussion group and one person can give you an alternative perspective that can just floor you and open up a whole new universe to what you're comprehending. Is that something that you're finding also?
Oh yeah, you know, that's one of the things that I loved about the group that I was part of. One of the people in the group was we would get into arguments sometimes, and I said, well, that's what I love about the group, because it means that we're discussing, you know, we're throwing out new ideas and we're finding out what we really think. You know, that's the reason I write. I write because I don't really know what I believe until I start writing things down, because that sorts it out in my head. And the same thing with discussing it with other people. It helps you sort things out and get a clearer view. You're exactly right. You need community with the Course.
Mm-hmm. And of the Course, or in the Course, if there was a single concept that you would say would be the grounding foundation stone, the cornerstone in what all the rest of the Course is all about, what would you put a spotlight on as far as that single cornerstone?
Well, that's pretty easy, and the Course says it itself, and that is that you forgive your brother for what he didn't do. And that is, you first see this world as a dream, and then when you forgive because it didn't really happen. It never happened. And that's the sum and substance of the Course. The Course goes on to say that forgiveness is our only function. And all of the other things we do in life, that's just, but forgiveness is all we're here for.
Mm-hmm. And following that thread of thought, forgiveness is, I guess you could say, or the atonement is contingent on forgiveness. Is this correct?
Yeah, well, I would say that's the result. Although the atonement is an ongoing process, but yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And how about the holy instant? What is your thoughts about that disruption of the space-time continuum here?
I think that's a great idea. The holy instant is one of those things I'm always thinking about, because I don't know if I have my a handle on it yet, because sometimes the Course seems to talk about the holy instant as things that happen over and over again in different circumstances, and then sometimes it seems to be almost talking about enlightenment, you know, the final step. But the holy instant to me is, from what I take from the Course, is all those moments when you let go of the ego and you let something bigger enter into this world that has nothing to do with time and space.
So then you become a conduit for the presence of God's consciousness to flow into this realm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel that physical manifestations, healings, and change of fortune and things like that are endemic to the Course? Are you going to be healed if you work with the Course in a diligent way?
Yeah, I think so. But I think the problem is if you try to get those things.
So what I am going to do is to conclude this episode and try to anticipate speaking with Jim again at some point in the not far distant future, and we can continue along with this idea of, do you expect physical manifestations as a part of being involved with A Course in Miracles? So you guys stay tuned for part 2 with Jim Anderson, and we'll arrange to make that happen. Have a great evening.